I was mentioning to Mark the last time I was here, it was February and it was 10 below zero. And then I was here, well, actually that was in the wintertime, so February was 10 below zero. And then I was here in the springtime and it was absolutely gorgeous. That's a photo that I took when I was here the last time. And then yesterday when I got off the plane, I thought I had made a mistake and I had landed in Baton Rouge, Louisiana or something. It was so hot. So I'm looking forward to being here in the fall so I complete the whole cycle. It is a pleasure. I come from Rhode Island. Rhode Island's about the size of this room, by the way. It's the only place I know where you can wake up late, not know where you're going, and arrive 20 minutes early. And there's a lot of advantages to that. What I want to do is I want to give you 40 years of experience in about 40 minutes. So you're going to have to fasten your safety belt as we go through this. I also want to compliment Sam. That was wonderful because that's context that lets us pause for a second and realize what this is all about. So let me start by giving you my first health promotion story, and this actually happened to me. In my recreation time, I do rather extreme things. I'm a mountain climber, from Mount Everest to Kilimanjaro to mountains in between. And this was about 8 years ago, and I was at a Valley Fitness Center when I was living in Ann Arbor. By the way, thank you for having a Wolverine into Gopher territory. We appreciate it. So I was at the Valley Fitness Center, and I'm pedaling away in a life cycle, and a young lady comes up to me, and she says, "Excuse me, sir," and I said, "Yes," and she said, "Sir, there's a new piece of equipment here that I think you'd really enjoy." And I said, "Yes, what is that?" And she said, "Well, sir, it's called a recumbent bicycle." I think I know where she's going with this. And I said, "Well, thank you very much, but I do like the life cycle." So I'm pedaling away, pedaling away. She's not going to go away. She's a very dedicated health promotion kind of individual. So she comes back to me and she said, "Sir," and I said, "Yeah." She said, "Sir, we have found that for people like you, that this is..." Okay, I know exactly where she's going, but no, I do like this, and I'm going to keep doing it, but thank you very much. No, she's not going to go away. So she stands there a little bit, and you can kind of hear the wheels turning, the smoke begins to billow as she tries to figure out, how do I tell this old guy what I need to tell him? So she walks back to me, and she said, "Sir," and I went, "Yes." And she said, "Sir, we have found that for the chronologically superior, this is a better piece of..." So I said, "You mean I'm getting old and my prostate could use a break?" And she said, "Yes, sir, that's it. So I stand before you chronologically superior. So I want you to hold on to that." It wasn't, gosh, maybe 3 weeks after that, and I'm one of those joggers who goes just fast enough to keep from falling over backwards. So no Lansby records, but I am tenacious. So I'm finishing up a 3-mile course. Again, this is back in Ann Arbor. And as I'm finishing up, I look around and I see this car that's approaching very slowly. It's not unusual, by the way, to get lost in this neighborhood where I lived in Ann Arbor. So as I turn around, I see this little old lady. She can barely see above the steering wheel. As I come to a complete stop, I'm about to tell you, go down, make a right at Ann Arbor Saline Road, make another right, and you're at I-94. She rolls the window down, she pokes her head out, and she said, "Sir, would you like a ride?" And I said, "No, I'm doing this on purpose." And she said, "Well, that may well be, sir, but you look like you could use a ride." I am an author. I've written a number of books, and I find the metaphors very helpful. And that's a pretty good metaphor in terms of what Mark was talking about and what Sam was talking about and what Blue Cross Blue Shield is all about. It's the tenacious aspect of keeping after this and keeping after this. This is a process as we move through this. So let me go ahead and give you some information. I'm going to put a lot of this in context as well. We'll talk a little about ROI. The answer is yes, there is a return. But let me put it in context for you as we go through this process. So I'm going to talk about radar. This is going to take us back to another wartime when I was a young Air Force airman on top of an extinct volcano in the Arctic Circle. And I'll bring that in again as a metaphor for you. Also, there are some fundamental understandings that are really, really important in terms of why do this. Because at the end of the day, we're talking about people. We're talking about individual lives. Yes, there's the economics and productivity and all those reasons behind it. But there's some real core visceral reasons that you have to consider. 10 level setting themes associated with this. This is also really important. We tend to dodge some of these principles and some of these themes, and we need to come to grips with them. I recently returned from Havana, Cuba. So I was down in Cuba studying the healthcare system with the full auspices and approval of the State Department. By the way, every time now I go to check in the airlines, I can't check in online because it's stamped that I've been in Cuba, so I always have to go in so they can see me. But I'll talk a bit about that in terms of some of the lessons that we can take even from horrific kinds of government structures. What does value-based design mean? I'll talk about that. What is wellness? This is kind of important. We throw this word around a lot. I've spent my whole career doing this, 3 kids through college. My wife has put up with me for 39 years in this wellness arena. I'm not quite sure, but I'll give you a definition. We'll talk about that. Framing this is a framing, by the way, that is now used in a variety of different ways of taking a look at your organization. So I'll talk about it in terms of what we do here, the components of prevention strategy, all of that stuff, and then back to radar. This next slide, when I show you this slide, if you don't laugh, you have no sense of humor. If you laugh too loudly, you're cruel. So let me take you back in time a bit with this. Oh, I heard some cruel. I heard some cruel in that. I recently did a lecture with Newt Gingrich. And the speaker and I were asked to forecast the health of the nation. The speaker and I do not always agree. In fact, rarely do we ever agree on anything. But when it comes to healthcare, we actually have a lot in agreement. And as I was preparing for that, I was going through some notes, and it appears that, gosh, about every 10 years or so, I'm asked to do forecasting in terms of what's going to happen in the healthcare arena. So I went back through my notes, and I found this promotion picture that was used of me back in 1978 when I was asked to address the same topic. It's kind of a blend of Geraldo Rivera and Mike Brady, don't you think? The spawn of, if they got together somehow, this would probably be it. I think the value of this is we've been talking about this for a long, long time. We're now moving into a lot of action, and I'll talk about why that occurs in a variety of settings in a second. But as a health educator, I'm delighted that we're at this particular point in time. So from 1978 to 2010, let's go back 10 years before that. As I said before, during another wartime, during Vietnam, they had sent me off to the Arctic Circle. So this good-looking kid here, who could be my grandson, was me back at that time. And all of a sudden, one day, I found myself sitting on top of an extinct volcano in the middle of the Arctic Circle, looking all around and seeing nothing but snow, more than you would even in Minnesota. So as I was sitting there thinking about what does this mean, realized, of course, later on it's really a wonderful metaphor because I was at a radar site. So that is actually the radar site where I was. There was a dorm right next to it where for 365 days I slept right next to the radar. That will actually come back into my story a little bit later. But who can tell me what radar is for? Why do we have radar? What's it all about? What does radar do? Yeah, it's early detection. It's early intervention. It's the whole idea that you're sitting someplace and all of a sudden there's a blip here and a blip there. But we often say to ourselves, wait a second, I'm really busy. Besides that, somebody else will take care of it. Maybe it doesn't exist. So we use radar in our life all the time. We have a suite that continues to go, and we're constantly saying, you know what, I'm really busy. Besides that, somebody else will take care of it, and maybe it doesn't exist. And then all of a sudden, we get deeper into our daily activities, and these blips get closer and closer, and more are encroaching from the outside, and we still say, oh, I'm really busy. Besides that, somebody else will take care of it, and maybe it's not that big a deal. And then all of a sudden, one day, we wake up, we look up, and all of a sudden, it is raining all these blips down on top of us. And what do we say then? Besides that. Where did that come from? I didn't see that. Oh, yeah, you saw it. You saw it way out here, didn't you? And you said, you know what, I'm really busy. Besides that, somebody else will take care of it, and maybe it doesn't exist. That's what we've done in healthcare. By the way, my short 40 minutes with you, your radar will turn on. Your personal radar will turn on. And that's good. It's meant to do that. I encourage you, just an aside from all the business stuff, please don't ignore it. Don't pretend that somebody else is going to take care of it. And if that blip has shown up before, it's going to continue to show up until you do something about it. So radar is a good metaphor to use. What was actually occurring is every Tuesday about 2 o'clock in the morning, the klaxons would go off. The Russians are coming. The Russians are coming. Because what would happen is that we were sitting up there watching Russia as they would take the bombers, push them into Alaskan airspace as far as they possibly could. We would see them. We would then call Elmendorf. Elmendorf Air Force Base would then scramble fighters and chase them back. And then the next night, some kid who looked just like that but spoke Russian would yell, "The Yanks are coming, the Yanks are coming," because what we did was we took B-52s, we guided them into Russian airspace as far as we possibly could. They would scramble Russian MiGs. They would chase them back into the U.S. airspace. And we'd sit and say, what a silly, silly game this is. What a game of cat and mouse this is. But think about it. People in Seattle really weren't aware of what was going on. People in Des Moines didn't know what was going on. People in Minneapolis didn't realize this was happening because somebody was paying attention and doing something about it. You can imagine if we had a hot pinochle game going and we said, well, don't worry about it, Elmendorf will pick it up. If they don't get it, Seattle's pretty good. Chicago Air Traffic Control, they're outstanding. They'll get the Russian bombers, but, well, of course, that's absurd, but we do this all the time. We do this in business. We do this as a society. We do it in our individual lives. Somehow the idea that we can hand off these concerns to somebody else. I'm telling you, we've done this for years and years and years. Mark and I have been doing this for a lot of decades. There was a whole lot of handing off. There is no abdication. There is no more handing off. We are all engaged in this process, and unless we work diligently together, it is going to get worse and worse and worse as time goes by. I'm an optimist. I am really excited about where we currently are, but recognize that's how we got here. So, radar. When I was doing the presentations over the last 40 years and taking a look at this, there were the dots on the map. There was a whole lot of them that were there. As I turn around today, it's not only the blips that were there back in 1978 and earlier, there's a whole lot more. This is a very complex area. It's not an area that any one organization can take care of by themselves. That's why it's important. Use your community resources. There's too many things here. I can't possibly understand them myself. I've got a staff of about 100 individuals, all of whom are young enough to be my children, but they're all way brighter than I am in terms of staying up with all the information. I've got a lot of experience, I've got a lot of intuitive knowledge, but I need lots and lots of different people to help me figure this game out. Here's my concern. My concern is that when you invite me back in another 30 years to do another talk for you, that all these blips will still be there, but it's also all of the ones outside that I'm concerned about. The ones you can't see that go beyond the sweep. Again, think in terms of your own personal life as well as your corporate life, the community that you live in, the state that you live in, our country, our world. There are tons of blips. We have to pay attention and deal with them. Okay. I'm also going to apologize. I got 40 minutes. It's arrogant and presumptuous to suggest in that time I can give you anything of depth. But if I can get you to think about one thing that you hadn't thought about, or maybe to ask a question of people around you, then my job has been done here. So, 10 level setting thematic statements. Again, I go around and I talk about these issues a lot. It's real important that we have some level setting. And here's the number one. I don't care what anybody tells you. Nothing is going to lower your healthcare costs. I was in Washington talking to a group in Washington on policy, and they said, what do we need to do to make sure that we don't screw up prevention, because it's so critically important, and we've gone down this path so many times before. And I said, the number one thing is quit lying to people. Just be straight with people. Don't lie to people. Nothing's going to lower your healthcare costs. That's not the issue. The reality is that there is this surge. If you can find some vehicle whereby you can apply a gentle tourniquet to slow the process down, if you can start diverting some of the $2.8 trillion that's going into the treatment side, move it into the prevention side, you're going to have this wonderful combination of compressed morbidity, which sounds cold and cruel, and expanded quality of life. And that's what we're all looking for. So no one's going to lower your healthcare costs. We just want to slow the process down. That's the reality. Oh my gosh, I should have given some warning before I put this up. If this is the first time you've had to deal with this, then I apologize. You know, I'm only being half facetious. I can imagine a headline, New England Journal of Medicine determines conclusively that 100% of people who are born will die one day. I can then see a Gallup poll that says 60% of people believe it'll happen to somebody else. And then another piece that says, of that 60%, 90% believe that it's going to happen peacefully while they sleep. That's not the way it's going to be. The part that you can control is the healthy part of the uncertainty, because we don't know when it's going to happen. You've got a date that's when you were born. There's going to be a date that when you die. Those we know, but it's the dash in between. That's the uncertain part of it, and that's the part that you can control as an organization and as an individual. So live the dash. The other part is absolutely guaranteed. You're going to die. Somehow we think of this as some vehicle whereby we can cure this. That's not it. It's how do we compress? How do we maximize the quality? 11 years ago, I walked into my accountant's office who had been diagnosed and treated for breast cancer. I walked out of his office after running a 10K, finished writing a book, and for the heck of it, I went like this. And I stopped dead in my tracks. I'd never heard of this disease in men. And there was something like a half marble or a BB, and I smiled at the power of suggestion. I'd written books and I'd lectured from Boston to Brussels on the importance of early detection, early intervention. What the heck was this? I'll compress the story. Invasive ductal carcinoma. I had breast cancer. 11 years ago, I had a radical mastectomy. The whole idea of paying attention, of being engaged and being involved, keeping your radar on, of maximizing whatever that dash is for you is so critically important. I couldn't control this. Remember I showed you the slide of the radar? And I said that the barracks was right next to that. For an entire year, bombarded by radiation. I was a kid born in the 40s, raised in the 50s. Every time we sneezed, that meant that you got a chest x-ray. Huge exposure to radiation. The part that I can control is whatever the dash is going to provide for me. After that moment, and I was in my 50s at that time, I went back to Alaska Mountaineering School, got recertified in climbing, decided I needed to go off to Mount Everest. I went and I climbed on Everest. I didn't summit, but I got up through the Khumbu Ice Falls. It was magnificent. I was told before I left, don't do it, you can't do it. What are you, crazy? Be realistic, be sensible, be reasonable. Came back, then went off to Africa, summited Kilimanjaro, and they said you can't, and I said, don't tell me I can't. There's probability, there's possibility. One is spirit and one is physics. As organizations, as individuals, as communities, as states, as nations, as a world. Wherever there is some probability, that means spirit, determination, cooperation, and working together as you move forward. So yes, we're all going to die. That's not the issue. The issue is the morbidity part of it. It's how do you spend the dash as an organization, as an individual. Well, this is strange for somebody who makes a living and has intense passion around wellness. Wellness is an amorphous, dangerous, and distracting term. It is kind of a catch-all. As I said, I'll ask people, what is wellness? And they'll say, well, you know, it's quitting smoking, it's losing weight, it's doing that. Oh, no. It's way, 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 way deeper than that. It has to do organizationally with the compressed morbidity, with the increased productivity, with dollars falling to the bottom line. It's disease prevention, it's health promotion, it's all of those things woven together. So when we hear the word wellness, sometimes it gets mushy and it becomes the last thing that we do. This is everything. This is the prevention piece. This is critical to you as individuals, for your family, for society, for your organizations. So pay attention to wellness. And when you hear wellness, think in terms of quality of life. Put your corporate hat on. Think in terms of productivity. Think about your ability to be competitive in your marketplace. The issues of concern are health promotion, disease prevention, compressed morbidity, increased productivity, medical cost control. Those are a lot of words, and you kind of glaze over at the words. Again, think in terms of the dash in whatever fashion that resonates for you. Ultimately, organizations measure success by mission and margin. This is important to recognize. I have a corporation that I run. I also wear a couple of other hats. I have a fiduciary responsibility that when I leave the office at night, that in the morning I get to open the doors again. That's a fiduciary responsibility. I must make sure that I take care of the margin aspect of what I do. But remember that you've got employees, when they walk through that door, they're going to measure success in terms of their subjective well-being. How was I treated? How do I feel? What's my level of comfort? Do I recognize that within this organization there is the whole issue of being accepted, respected, and secure, unless told otherwise, and does that carry over? So I'm one of those individuals. I walk through those doors. I have subjective well-being issues as well, but I also have fiduciary responsibility, as you do, to make sure that you've got margin. Now here's the beauty of it. The two go together perfectly. There is no either or. If you're taking care of employees' subjective well-being as well as objective well-being, remember there is the science of life, and then there is the art of living. I know the science of life. I can give you the color templates for that. That's pretty easy. Don't smoke so much, don't drink so much, exercise, all that stuff. That's the science of life. The issue Mark was talking about and Sam was talking about, that's the art of living piece of it. And that's the difference. It's the art of living piece of it. And you control a lot of that in terms of the environment that you have for people. Okay, here's another reality around this. I don't care what people tell me. I don't care what organizations tell me. And I'm not a cynic. I'm not a skeptic. I've just been around for a while. There is no real political will to change anything in this country. By the way, that's not pejorative, and there's no value associated with that. When I go into a corporation and somebody says, nothing is more important to me than the health of my employees, I say, you know what, with all due respect, that's a contradiction. It's not a value judgment, it's a contradiction. Your activities are contrary to your words, and that's okay. It's maybe fourth on your list. You got widgets you got to get out the door by the end of the quarter. You've got stockholders to appease. You've got to make sure you take care of a number of issues, but it's not the most important. So until you get out of hyperbole and start asking yourself, well, you know, he's right, the next question becomes, well, then why isn't it? Why isn't it? And it's because you think of it as that extra stuff that you're going to do when times are good. And I'm telling you, as an economist, as a business person, as an educator, as a university professor, as somebody who's been around for a long time, it is critical because you won't have an organization to move down the road if you don't take care of that fluffy stuff called wellness and prevention. There's no political will. When I was in Cuba, and there's tons of stories about when I was in Cuba, and there's no question that wherever I went, not only the CIA, but also everybody on Castro's team was following me. I know I was bugged, I know everything was orchestrated, but I still was able to get off the streets. I was also able to talk to NATO, I was able to talk to UNICEF, I was able to get involved with third-party groups. It's pretty phenomenal what some of these countries have done with very limited resources. So the issue is this a moral, ethical crisis that's determined this? And of course the answer is yes. It's an imperative both morally and ethically, but more than that, it is an economic imperative. When you have no money, it is critical that you keep your people as healthy as possible. You can't afford it. When you have a country where, in Cuba when Batista was there, so going back to 59, 58, the life expectancy for a male was about 48, and now it's 78. That's a lot of years. I can't afford as a government to have you sick, period. So call it materialistic, call it pragmatic, call it whatever you will, but everybody is highly vested in making sure that you are as ambulatory as possible, as alert as well as possible for as long as possible. In our country, there isn't the sense of urgency. There is a belief that somehow always our kids will be taken care of, always our employees will be taken care of, and when I die, by the way, when I recognize finally that I'm part of the 60% that recognize that yes, indeed, it will be me, it may also be that I die relatively peacefully in terms of the morbidity part of it. But those are areas that I can control and you can provide the environment for it. So political will, it's okay, but until you recognize that it is third, fourth, maybe fifth on your list, you're not going to see measurable kinds of changes. Well, this is good. Where did you see this from? Where is this from? Gordon Gekko? Yeah, Gordon Gekko, the whole idea that greed is good. And when Gekko was talking, he was addressing a board of directors trying to get them to make him, or actually stockholders, so that he could become chairman of the board, so he could make them millions and millions of dollars in Wall Street. Well, if that's millions, then that's chump change, because when we're talking about healthcare, we're talking trillions and trillions of dollars. That's another reality. The current healthcare system is such that a lot of power, money, and influence are dependent upon you presenting with illness. They are, by design, dependent upon your employees getting sick early and staying in the healthcare system as long as possible. Think about it. If you can start a business where you can capture people early on, you can hold on to them, and progressively their spend is going to get larger and larger. Sounds like a pretty good business, doesn't it? Well, that's healthcare today. Just understand that's exactly what it is. So taking a fraction of that, take a 2% solution, and move some of those dollars into the prevention side of it. So if you choose, I'm 63 years old. If you choose at 63 to climb whatever mountains you wish, that it won't be health, unless it's some kind of catastrophic condition or accident, that prevents you. It'll be an issue of choice for you. So hold on to that and recognize the power that you have and the realities around this is not easy stuff, because you lay down all the information that Mark was talking about, Sam was exemplifying, and you'll hear more, and you say, yeah, why isn't it being done? It's not being done because it's on its way, by the way, to being $4.3 trillion by 2012. There are a lot of people who are highly vested in a sickness industry. Pogo was right. Anybody chronologically superior enough to remember Pogo? Who is Pogo and what was Pogo right about? Oh. Pogo looked in the mirror and he said, I've seen the enemy. And the enemy is absolutely this whole idea again of deferring. Why don't they? Why don't they? Why doesn't somebody? Why doesn't somebody? Who? Well, wait a second. You are that somebody. You are the individual. You are the group. You collectively have an opportunity. One of the things I recognize, and I've traveled all over the world, and when I was in Cuba, 3 days have gone by, and as a writer, I'm standing in Hemingway's room where he wrote For Whom the Bell Tolls. I've been there 3 days, and I'm looking out at the beautiful Caribbean, and I realize, oh my gosh, I've been here 3 days. I have not seen a single boat. I haven't seen a single boat. So I said to Tatiana, our guide, our communist guide, of course, I said, Tatiana, I don't see any boats. And she looked at me like, duh. And I said, Tatiana, no boats? And she said, no. And I said, well, why no boats? And she said, well, Michael, if there were boats, people would leave. That's why there's no boats. Duh. Oh, they would leave. Well, I guess if I could be dictator, there's a lot of things I could do around health. But thank God that's not what we have. You do have choices. You do have options. You do have opportunities. And one of them is you have a voice. So if you're not pleased with healthcare in your community, if you're not pleased with prevention services, if you're not pleased with what's happening with your children, speak up. If you don't speak up, you are Pogo, because the enemy is us, so we have to speak up. Again, one of the beauties of living in a democracy is you have that opportunity to do so. Healthcare spend and focus needs a shift from disease management, by the way, that's a survival mode, into primary prevention, and that's the thrival mode. Am I saying get rid of DM in case management and all? No, of course not. There's value. I'm not sure in terms of an ROI what the value is. The ROI value comes in keeping your people out of the healthcare system at all possible, and once in the healthcare system, you compress their experience. And you don't need a health economist to figure that out for you. The common sense aspect to that is critical. We want to keep our people healthy, and when you do become sick, the issue, there's a lot of age-related conditions, we want it compressed so we can move forward, high quality of life for the individual, back productive for you as the employers. And everything I just told you is arrogant and presumptuous. It's a list. It's just a list. It doesn't mean anything. It's just a list. What's real important is that you recognize that there is a concern that you need to do something about it, that somebody else isn't going to take care of it for you. If it's been there before, it's going to keep coming back. I love Minnesota. I love the state of Minnesota. It's a fabulous place. One of the reasons for it is because you guys are always so high in terms of the wellness indicators. It is a great place to live, and it could be so much greater. It continues to be a shining example for the nation. It could be so much shinier, so much better. Be careful that you don't lower your standards. The people in Rhode Island were talking about the fact, well, you know, in Rhode Island, the obesity rate, gosh, it's best in New England. Well, that brings to mind a whole lot of analogies I could use, not all that flattering. But if you have an obesity rate of 28% and you are the best, that says something about your norming group. It doesn't say anything about your health. So be careful in terms of lowering standards around this. Keep leading the charge in terms of health. Be very careful. The other issue was talking about it before in terms of how quickly this has grown. You've got all the comorbidities associated with this. So we have more and more children who are obese. What that means is those kids, once you're in that trap, the likelihood of falling out of it is minimal. That means you're going to see a dramatic increase in adult obesity as time goes by. So you have your work cut out for you. Okay. Change is a linear and sequential process. This is real important. We're talking about change. Change is challenging. Change is difficult. And by the way, you're not the same person you were when you walked in this room because you've changed dramatically since you walked in this room. You can't control the aspect of change. You can control the insides in terms of what it means to you, but you're going to change. The whole issue is this is progressive. It goes from intellectual. You can get lots and lots of information, more and more data. You have to have that. But it's not until your emotions involved that you become engaged. Did you hear about Jim? Did you hear about Sally's kid? My God. Did you hear about the company down the road? They had to close the doors because of health care. My God. But then all of a sudden, you know, you're kind of busy. Besides that, somebody else is going to take care of these issues. And maybe it's not that bad in your community. Until it happens to you, and then all of a sudden it's very deeply visceral. It's you. What do you mean there's layoffs here? What do you mean the healthcare costs are such that we can't expand? What do you mean we can't be competitive? All of a sudden you are now viscerally engaged because it isn't an abstract and it isn't intellect, but now it's viscera. It's part of your guts. Again, as a health educator, I'm delighted because that's where we are as a nation right now. It is in the belly. It is gut-churning time. And the value of that is that's when action occurs. It doesn't occur until it hits the belly and begins to churn. Our objective as educators, Blue Cross's objective, is to help you get that point of action before you hang the signs that say, close pending. Is to do it now rather than wait. And don't fool yourself in terms of the trends that are happening out there. And then it becomes cellular. It becomes part of who you are. Many of you in this room don't smoke, but probably didn't wake up this morning and think to yourself, today's another day I won't smoke. Today's another day. There may be a time, but now it's cellular. It's part of who you are. Mark didn't wake up and think to himself, today I'm going to exercise. I'm going to give it some thought, but I think today is the day I'm going to... No, it's part of who he is. It takes a lot of repetition, disruption, creative, innovative disruption before you get to that point. In terms of ROI for any of these programs, it takes about 3 years after initiation. But during that time, and by the way, it's about a 3 to 1, but during that time, you begin to apply that slow tourniquet to begin to reverse the process a bit in terms of the extent of the increases that you've been experiencing. Value-based places, you know what this means? This kind of just means that what we're going to do now is make sure that everybody is highly vested in the process. Before, we simply provided all the benefits to our employees independent of what you did. And now we're saying we're going to provide, but there is skin in the game. You need to be engaged as employees as well. I'm going to support you, but there's no longer free lunch. Again, a kid born in the 40s, raised in the 50s, in my 60s now, went through Roosevelt, Truman, Eisenhower, Kennedy, Johnson on, back when a time when, here's the deal, if you get sick, I'm going to take care of it for you. So don't worry about it. Reach in your pocket, you got some kind of plastic, it'll take care of it for you, so don't worry about it. My generation did a great job, by the way. We upheld our end of the bargain. We got sick. Now we expect you to uphold your end of the bargain. And what is that? Well, you're going to pay for it. You're going to pay for it. I'm not worried about you paying my bills. But my children, my grandchildren, that's a different story. But that was the deal I signed up for. What do you mean it's no longer available? It's no longer available. There ain't no more money. So we have to change the whole process. That's kind of what it means. Value-based plan design blends employer-sponsored service requirements with a reward or compliance system that leads to increased employee engagement improvements. We are in this together, is what that means. Work with organizations that will help you design tight, proven plans in this particular area. Okay, here we go. I've got about 10 minutes left, and now I got to the whole question of what is wellness. If I ask everybody in this room what is wellness, my guess is I'd probably get one answer for every person in this room of what wellness is. And very often it goes kind of to the idea that, well, it isn't sickness. No. It really, truly does go way beyond that. And to recognize that there's incremental opportunity from preconception to the last breath that you take to improve your participation, to prove your subjective as well as your objective well-being. I don't know. Carrying the cancer, and by the way, it's in situ, but I still carry cancer. I don't know if I have 5 months or 5 years or 50 years, and I'm not being morose because I know I do control the dash in between, and I want to maximize that time. So is it good for whoever pays my insurance bills? Yeah, of course it is. Is it good for society in general? I would hope so. Does my wife want to put up with me for another 39 years? As of this morning, she said, yeah, that's good. Would I like to watch my grandchildren grow? Yeah. All of those things. Well, I have a role in that. And that role is very dependent upon wellness. So here's a definition that I wrote, which means I kind of agree with this. It's a dynamic, objective, subjective progression toward a state of complete physical, intellectual, emotional, spiritual, and I have to stop for a second and emphasize spiritual. I don't care if you're bricks and mortar. I don't care if you worship the duct tape on the floor. As long as you recognize that there is some force that is a collective force that's bigger than you. It's so critically important. Whatever your literal or figurative mountains that you have to climb, that you understand that there is a collective energy that can assist you, that there's a higher power, however you define it, that's critical as you move through this journey. Social well-being, not merely the absence of disease or infirmity, incremental improvements can occur from preconception to the last breath. So it is ongoing and it's critical to everything. That's what wellness is. On the continuum from a business standpoint, this is kind of what you look at. You look at this natural progression that goes from prenatal again all the way through, and you see the progression of green to red. Recognize that for somebody my age and younger, generally speaking, you start getting into the red, and it gets deeper and deeper and deeper, and our system's dependent upon it. You can also take large dollar signs and move those dollar signs larger and larger as you go from left to right. And by the way, it is not age dependent. There certainly are some things that I can't control at this point. I'm 63 years of age. I'm a cancer survivor. But there's tons of other things that I can control that keeps me and you in the green, that keeps those dollar signs in the cent signs, and hopefully keeps my family and my community happier as we progress through it. But you provide an opportunity for that. Don't buy into the notion that because it's in the middle there that it has to happen to your organization. That's baloney. It absolutely is not the case, but there's lots of things out there that will lead you down that path. Prevention, early detection, early intervention, medical management, end-of-life initiatives. Compress, compress, compress. We now have all the technology necessary to keep all of us in this room around till we're about 78, 80 years of age. I can do that, independent, by the way, of when you present into the healthcare system. So you can present at 30 and have a lifestyle that's horrific. It's okay. I've got the drugs, I've got technology, I can keep you around. What you're going to have is you're going to have compressed quality of life and you're going to have expanded morbidity, but I can keep you around to 78, 80. Or by making good choices, by having a corporate culture that invites healthy behavior, I can have you around for a long, long time, and you're going to have compressed morbidity at the end, a small spot of red at the end, and a whole lot of green on the left. It depends upon you as an organization and certainly you as individuals, but it is up to you. This is not Cuba. You get to have choices along the way. Oh, these are all kinds of programs, and all these programs, by the way, Blue Cross Blue Shield can provide for you. They can direct you within your community. Again, Minnesota is filled with wonderful opportunities. As I said at the very beginning, this is highly complex. Don't think for a second you can do this on your own. You can't. Can you do a health fair? Yep, you probably do that. Can you do a smoking policy? Yep. Can you have a nice, colorful stairway campaign to encourage people? Yeah, you probably can do that. It's tying them all together. How does it impact your claims? How does it impact productivity, competitiveness in your marketplace? That's where you need assistance. That's where you need somebody working with you to guide you through this. That's where you need a Sherpa, by the way. And if you ever have a chance to hear me speak about Mount Everest and Sherpas, that's an interesting talk. But we're all Sherpas. Make sure that you apply that here. 5 W's, and then, oh, this is perfect timing. This is real important. You have to have some kind of system. Very often what people do with wellness or any kind of business strategy is they jump into it. Usually there's a committee before, and the committee consists of those individuals who are farthest away from the front line, but they make all the decisions. They set a date and they say, go. There's a number of things you need to do first. Framing the challenge. What's happening? Assessing current conditions. So what if I don't do anything at all? What now? What next? What difference did it make? it's very important that you take baseline. Where are you currently in your organization in terms of the impact of health and productivity? Where are you in terms of your claims trends? Get all that information first before you start this journey. I remember I was giving a talk in Dallas not that many years ago, and I looked out, and it was very interesting because I had a room filled with docs, and the pharmaceutical industry was there, employer groups were there, lawyers were there, a bunch of people were there. It wasn't that long where I would have been in that room 5 times. I would have been addressing docs, and then I come back again. It could be Belgium or Paris, or it could have been Peoria. And I'm addressing insurance, and I come back. Sometimes they just would rent a theater someplace, and I address general public, just people like us, about these issues. So I'm looking at this audience, but they're all together. They're all sitting in the same room. They don't like each other, but they're in the same room. Reminded me of network. Remember, go to the window, open the window, yell as loud as you can. You're mad as hell. You're not going to take it anymore. So all these people, there was anger. I could sense the anger. So I said to them, you're mad as hell. What are you angry about? When it comes to healthcare, what are you angry, and who are you angry with? What do you think I heard in terms of, and I've done this 100 times across country, who are people angry with when it comes to healthcare and healthcare costs? It's okay to say it. Well, I was the insurance company. Are you kidding me? Every year they go up and up and up. The reserves get bigger and bigger. Those execs have incredible perks at the insurance companies. It's the lawyers. It's the lawyers. Oh my God, they're such a litigious. It's the lawyers who do it. It's the docs. It's the docs. I still have to go there. I wait for 2 hours. They see me for 8 minutes, and they're playing golf on Wednesdays. It's the docs who did it. Pretty soon, all of the finger-pointing stops. It gets very quiet, and the question is there anybody else that you're angry with? And somebody will whisper, as Pogo would, us. And if us is the plural, the singular is, it's me. No, it's not me. I didn't do anything. I got old. I got sick. That's what I was supposed to do. Recognize again that we are in the same boat. We have to work together on this issue, and I don't care how you got here. You're not going to get out of this mess unless we work together and stop this stuff. It's not productive at this stage. Let's work together, take all of our resources, and make a difference. So you got that. Well, that's just cost stuff. You've seen that. I've talked about pennies to dollars. You've seen that. So what? This is the other part of this. It's the so what part of it. What if I don't do anything at all? What are the trends and consequences? So I see my conditions right now if I don't do anything else. And I will say to organizations who are scratching their head and thinking about doing prevention or wellness, and we'll get into ROI stuff, but my question always becomes, well, are you happy with your trend? Are you happy with where your rates are going? Are you happy with, and they look at me like Tatiana did in Cuba, like I'm crazy. Well, of course they're not happy. Does it make sense? Does it make intuitive sense that if you engage your employees, if you improve the culture of your employees, if you initiate some very basic awareness education programs, that you can start to bend or at least freeze that trend a little bit in terms of its growth rate? And the answer is yes. Well, just use your head in terms of trends and consequences, because if you don't do anything at all, I can predict exactly where you're going to be. It's linear math. I just have to follow the trend line out, and you can tell me how long you can stay in business with that kind of trend line. So what is real important? It is the DNA. There is the ROI, and then the DNA is the do nothing at all. Can you afford the DNA? Can you afford the DNA? What now? Oh, here's the trends again, as I showed you. 2015, over $4 trillion. As Dirksen used to say, a zero here, a zero there, we're talking real dollars. And it has an impact upon your business. When you talk about ROI studies, there are so many. There are 63 peer-reviewed studies that look into this whole issue. Ron Getzel is probably the preeminent health economist in this area. I always just take it right down to Ron's research at Cornell and the work he did at MedStat. It's pretty simple. When you look at the literature published on health promotion outcomes, the average ROI is somewhere around $3 for every $1 invested. At the most elementary level, invest $1 or $1.50, you can expect $300 to $450 savings per employee per year. Worksites typically don't realize these returns, however, until about 3 years into the program. Is there a return on investment? The answer is yes. Can you handle the DNA? That's your bigger question. Can you pretend that those blips are not getting closer and closer, that there's more out there? Can you afford to say, you know what, really busy right now besides that somebody else will take care of this, and maybe it's not that bad. Guess what? It is that bad. No one else is going to take care of it, and it's going to keep coming more and more and more in terms of what's happening out there. What now? This is the triage part of it. What do I need to do immediately to stop the hemorrhaging? Now recognize that it's taken me till step 3 to get into not even yet my strategic plan, my emergency plan, my triage plan. What do I do right now that I have to do immediately? Then I can get into the whole issue in terms of what am I going to do with my strategic plan. The reality is we need to shift from sick care to well care. So that's the process. You go to the situation where are we today? What's going to happen if we do nothing at all? What do we need to do immediately? Then we have the strategic plan, and then you measure, measure, measure throughout the whole process. Okay. Lots and lots of information. What I want to leave you with, again, is to recognize that whole issue in terms of your responsibility, your accountability, your opportunity, for you as individuals, for you as representatives of your organizations, for you as citizens of your town, members of your state, and with me, a citizen of this country. What is your contribution? What are your opportunities? And more importantly, what are you going to do about it? Now, again, I started this with a radar analogy. During the course of this, I want to take it back to a personal level. Somewhere during the talk, you had a blip that went off inside of your head. Whether you do anything about it or not is up to you, but you can no longer be a victim, by the way, once you recognize and acknowledge blips. You made choices. You can pretend that it didn't exist, or you can turn your radar off. But now it's yours, so you're not a victim in terms of what are you going to do. So I would ask you to ask yourself and quietly reply, what are you going to do about your corporate concerns? What are you going to do about your individual concerns? What are you going to do about your societal concerns? If you do nothing, again, Pogo was right. Well, on behalf of, let's see, Mike Brady, Geraldo Rivera, that good-looking kid from Alaska, I want to thank you very much for your time.